Okay, guys, I was trying to get this thing to get clear. For some reason, it was clear, then it wasn't. But anyway, hi. Today is Bible study day, and I'm going to be continuing in Esther, and we're going to continue the way we did last time. It seems like you guys liked that, and I liked it too. I mean, I end up learning more than I would otherwise sometimes. I mean, I like Bible studies and all of those things, but sometimes just reading helps a lot. Or having someone else read it out loud to you. You hear things differently, I guess you could say. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and continue in chapter 5, not verse 5, verse 1, chapter 5. And we're going to be continuing to Esther's banquet. Okay, so it says, now it happened on the third day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace across from the king's house, while the king sat on his royal throne in the royal house, facing the entrance of the house. So it was when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court that she found favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter. We know that you don't go to the king unless he holds out his golden scepter. You don't, even if you're his wife, you don't have freedom to just go. And the king said to her, what do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you up to half the kingdom. So Esther answered, if it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, bring Haman quickly, that he may do as Esther has said. So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared. At the banquet of wine, the king said to Esther, sorry, I had to yawn. Don't know where that came from. I had plenty of sleep. I do still have the baggage, but I had plenty of sleep. At the banquet of wine, the king said to Esther, what is your petition? It shall be granted to you. What is your request? Up to half the kingdom, it shall be done. Then Esther answered and said, my petition and request is this. If I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, then let the king and Haman come to the banquet, which I will prepare for them. And tomorrow I will do as the king has said. So she says, come to the banquet. And, then whenever they come to the banquet, she says, come to the banquet that I will be preparing tomorrow, and then I will tell you what I desire. Is this not focusing, or is it just my eyes this morning? I don't know which one it is. It's one or the other. Hopefully it's focusing and it's just my eyes. But I do find that when I looked from printed, from books and stuff up, it takes my eyes longer to focus than it used to. That's what happens with age. It's okay. Let's keep going. So Haman went out that day joyful and with a glad heart. I'm sorry, y'all. I don't know why I'm yawning so much. It's just going to be a thing. Okay. It's just the way life is. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand nor tremble before him, he was filled with indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and called for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Then Haman told them of his great riches, the multitude of his children, everything in which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and servants of the king. Moreover, Haman said, besides, Queen Esther invited no one but me to come in with the king to the banquet that she prepared. And tomorrow I am again invited by her, along with the king. Yet all this avails me nothing so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. So he's being blessed. He's getting all these things that he wants, and he's being moved up in life, but he's still not happy because Mordecai the Jew is alive, because he is at the king's gate, because he has a place of prominence. Mordecai does. And Haman can't stand it. I mean, there's so much bitterness and hate in his heart that he can't even see the blessings he has, because all he can see is Mordecai. I mean, to let something like that, someone, a human being sitting there, or a thing, get to you in that way, there's got to be something mentally wrong, you know? There's got to be something wrong with this person that they hate so much. Well, the thing wrong is they hate so much. But anyway, then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, let a gallows be made, 50 cubits high. I'm so sorry. And in the morning suggest to the king that Mordecai be hanged on it. Then go merrily with the king to the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, so he had the gallows made. So they just said, oh, well, just kill him. Like, that'll get rid of your trouble. Just kill him. So he had the gallows made. The whole crew are vicious and evil. The whole crew is just terrible. So now we're in chapter 6. And I don't know why I'm yawning so much. I had plenty of sleep. I don't know what's up with that, and I'm sorry. Okay. That night the king could not sleep, so one was commanded to bring the book of the records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, the doorkeepers who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. Then the king said, what honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? And the king's servants who attended him said nothing has been done for him. So far Mordecai had not reaped what he had sown. He had not gotten any sort of it's not recommendation. What is the word? Anyway, he had not gotten any sort of recognition, that's the word, for saving the king from harm. So the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to suggest that the king hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. He walks up in there. I mean, who do you think kept the king awake that night? It had to be God. I mean, it had to be God that had him want to read the book of Chronicles, the things that had happened, the things he needed to know, the things he needed to, remember. The king's servant said to him, Haman is there standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king asked him, what shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, whom would the king delight to honor more than me? Conceited. He is very conceited. And Haman answered the king, for the man who the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought, which the king has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, which has a royal crest placed on its head. Then let this robe and the horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that he may array the man whom the king delights to honor. Then parade him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. So he was saying all this stuff about, let him be paraded out in your robe on your horses, because he thought it was himself. He thought he was fixing to get a grand parade and honor, and everybody was going to be looking at him. He's a look at me type of person, and he had no idea who he was talking about. He didn't know it wasn't him. Then the king said to Haman, hurry, take the robe and the horse as you have suggested, and do this for Mordecai the Jew, who sits within the king's gate. Leave nothing undone in all that you have spoken. Wow, that probably got him going, didn't it? I mean, he had this evil plot for Mordecai, and it all goes backwards because of God. That's the only reason. So Haman took the robe and the horse, arrayed Mordecai, and led him on horseback through the city square, and proclaimed before him, "Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor." That would be so humbling to some, right? It might humble you and make you think, oh, I better act right. At least that's my thought. Afterward, Mordecai went back to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house mourning and with his head covered. When Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him, his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, If Mordecai before whom you have begun to fall is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs came and hastened to bring Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. So I'm going to do one more chapter, and then we're going to do the other 3 chapters, I think, next week. So now we're on chapter 7. We're finding out that Haman was an evil, jealous man who felt that he should be the one who's honored above all. He was more important than anyone, and he was not humble at all. But he also surrounded himself with the same exact type of people. His wife and his friends were the same type of people. And whoever you hang around, whoever you're involved with, their thoughts and opinions will rub off on you. So be careful who you're hanging around with. Be careful who you're letting speak into your life and feed into your life, because they can start feeding in evil, disgusting thoughts that do not honor God. And I feel like that is what was happening with this whole little group of people who definitely, they did not love God. They didn't know God, because if they did, they would not have been doing this thing that they were doing. Okay, so then we're going to go on chapter 7. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther, and on the second day at the banquet of wine, the kings again said to Esther, What is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you, and what is your request up to half the kingdom? It shall be done. Then Queen Esther answered and said, If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. Had we been sold as male and female slaves, I would have held my tongue, although an enemy could never compensate for the king's loss. So in other words, what she's saying, if they had wanted to sell us as slaves, as workers, I would have never said anything. You know, you would have lost a lot, but, you know, the king would have lost a lot of people, but, you know, it wouldn't be the same as him wanting them to die. So King Ahasuerus answered and said to Queen Esther, Who is he and where is he? Who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing? Who wants to do this? The king is not an evil man. He didn't want to do that. That's not his type of way. And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. So Haman was terrified before the king and queen. Then the king arose in his wrath from the banquet of wine and went into the palace garden. But Haman stood before Queen Esther, pleading for his life, for he saw that evil was determined against him by the king. He saw he was about to die, that things were not going his way, that all his evil schemes got him nowhere. And the queen knew what he was about to do. Now, I don't think he knew the queen was Jewish. From everything I've read, I don't think he understood that for some reason. I just don't think he put the two and two together. I don't think he knew that Mordecai and her were related. Then the king arose in his... Oh, I already read that part. But did I? No, I did not. Then the king arose in his wrath from the banquet of wine and went into the palace garden. But Haman stood before Queen Esther. Oh, I did read that part. When the king returned from the palace garden to the place of the banquet of wine, Haman had fallen across the couch where Esther was. Then the king said, "Will he also assault the queen while I am in the house?" As the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Now Harbonah, one of the eunuchs, said to the king, "Look, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on the king's behalf, is standing at the house of Haman." So then the king said, "Hang him on it." He's just like, get rid of him. Just be done with the mess. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath subsided. I want to keep going. I think we can quit. I'm going to go ahead and finish it up, I think. I was just going to do those chapters and then just keep it on till the next time, but I haven't been talking to you guys along with this time, so I think it'll be alright if I keep going. I think. I don't know. I don't want to keep them too long, but okay, let's just keep going. Chapter 8. On that day, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came before the king, and Esther had told how he was related to her. So the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman. So not only does Mordecai get paraded around by an enemy, he gets elevated by the king because he was a good man. And the queen let the king know who Mordecai was to her. Now Esther spoke again to the king and fell down at his feet and implored him with tears to counteract the evil Haman the Agagite and the scheme which he had devised against the Jews. And the king held out the golden scepter towards Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king and said, "If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and things seem right to the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to revoke the letter devised by Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to annihilate the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that will come to my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my countrymen?" Because remember, Haman had sent it out that all of the Jews would be killed at a certain time. Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, "Indeed, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows because he tried to lay his hands on the Jews. You yourselves write a decree concerning the Jews as you please in the king's name, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For whatever is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's signet ring, no one can revoke." So we already knew that because of Haman having the signet ring before. So the king's scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews, the satraps, the governors, and the princes and provinces from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces in all, to every province in his own script, to every people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed it with the king's signet ring, and sent letters by couriers on horseback, riding on royal horses, bred from swift steeds. So they're going on fast horses. They got to get this done quick. By these letters, the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little children and women, and to plunder their possessions on one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. So they're told, you can defend yourselves, and then once you've defended yourselves, you can take whatever they had. You can plunder their stuff. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province and published for all people, so that the Jews would be ready on the day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The courier who rode on royal horses went out, hastened, and pressed on by the king's command. And the decree was issued in Shushan, the citadel. So Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, with a great crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness, joy and honor. And in every province and city, wherever the king's command and decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness and feast and a holiday. Then many of the people in the land became Jews, because of the fear of the Jews fell upon them. So they didn't want to die. They went and they sided with the Jews because they didn't want to be against them. So then chapter 9, the Jews destroy their tormentors. Now in the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, on the 13th day, the time came for the king's command and his decree to be executed. On the day that the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, the opposite occurred, in that the Jews themselves overpowered those who hated them. So they executed their plan perfectly. The Jews gathered together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm, and no one could withstand them, because fear of them fell upon all people. And all the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and all those doing the king's work helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's palace, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For this man, Mordecai, became increasingly prominent. Thus the Jews defeated all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, with slaughter and destruction, and did what they pleased with those who hated them. And in Shushan, the citadel, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. Also Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Paratha, Adalia, Aridatha, Parmashta. I'm trying to read these, but I'm probably butchering them. Arasai, Aradai, and Vajazada. I don't know. We can all just try. The 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, they killed, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. That day, the number of those who were killed in Shushan the citadel was brought to the king, and the king said to Queen Esther, "The Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the citadel, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? It shall be granted to you. Or what is your further request? It shall be done." Then Esther said, "If it pleases the king, let it be granted to the Jews who are in Shushan to again tomorrow, according to today's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows." So the king commanded this to be done, and the decree was issued in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. And the Jews who were in Shushan gathered together again on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and killed 300 men in Shushan, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. The remainder of the Jews in the king's provinces gathered together and protected their lives, that had rest from their enemies, and killed 75,000 of their enemies. 75,000 enemies. That is so much. And those are the ones that were going to come after them, if you think about that. But they did not lay a hand on the plunder. This was on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th of the month, they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews who were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day, as well as on the 14th day, and on the 15th of the month they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages who dwelt in the unwalled towns, they don't have walls, celebrated the 14th day of the month of Adar with gladness and feasting as a holiday, and for sending presents to one another. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters to all the Jews near and far who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, to establish among them that they should celebrate yearly the 14th and 15th days of the... I'm so sorry. I don't understand this, why I start yawning when I start reading out loud. I used to do that when I read to the kids. I'm fixing to stop, so I'll be right back. Okay, my camera stops at 24 minutes. I don't know why. I've tried to figure it out. Actually, it's the reason why that I stopped using my Nikon back when I first started doing YouTube, which this one has a lot better resolution than that one did, but I stopped using it because it would stop at 24 minutes. I don't know. Anyway, where was I at? And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters to all the Jews near and far who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, to establish among them that they should celebrate yearly the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar as the days on which the Jews had rest from their enemies, as the month which was turned from sorrow to joy for them, and from mourning to a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, of sending presents to one another and gifts to the poor. So the Jews accepted the custom which they had begun, as Mordecai had written to them, because Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to annihilate them, and had cast Pur, that is, the lot, to consume them and destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letter that this wicked plot which Haman had devised against the Jews should return on his own head, and that he and his son should be hanged on the gallows. So they called these days Purim, after the name Pur. Is it Purim and Pure? Why don't you focus on me? It doesn't like me. Therefore, because of all the words of this letter that they had seen concerning this matter, what had happened to them, the Jews established and imposed it upon themselves and their descendants and all who would join them, that without fail they should celebrate these 2 days every year, according to the written instructions and according to the prescribed time, that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, that these days of Purim should not fail to be observed among the Jews, and that the memory of them should not perish among their descendants. Then Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter about Purim. I want to say Purim. I might be wrong. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim at their appointed time, as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had prescribed for them, as they had decreed for themselves and their descendants concerning matters of their fasting and lamenting. So the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. So let's see. I don't know if there's a certain day, but I know I've seen it on calendars and I've heard of this feast days, but I'm not sure exactly when it is. I do have one more chapter 10. It's like tiny, but I do want to find out when Purim is celebrated. Okay, it may be different every year. It is different every year. Because in 2024, it's March 21st and 24th and 25th. In 2025, it's March 13th and 15th. In 2026, it's March 2nd and 4th. In 2027, it's March 24th and 22nd through 24th. And 2028, it's March 9th and 11th and 12th. I guess they don't do weekends. I don't know. I have always wondered about feast days and stuff. I don't know a lot about the Jewish holidays and feast days. So maybe one day we could maybe look at that. That's a lot though. But right now I want to focus on the ladies in the Bible, the women. Alright, let's do chapter 10. It's very short. And King Ahasuerus imposed tribute on the land and on the islands of the sea. Now all the acts of the power of his power and his might, and the account of the greatness of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was second to King Ahasuerus, and was great among the Jews, and well received by the multitude of his brethren, seeking the good of his people and speaking peace to all his countrymen. So Mordecai was a very gentle man. He was not set out to hurt people. He was not, at least this is my take, he was not trying to get in a higher position. He just wanted to protect the Jewish people. He wanted for everyone to live happily and in one accord. And Haman was this evil man, and you know, whenever it all started with the queen Vashti not doing as she was supposed to do, so she got cast out. Honestly, I don't know if she died or just divorced. I don't know how that worked. But the king needed a new queen, so he chose Esther. And I believe God put all of this together on purpose. Esther and Mordecai were cousins, and you know, Mordecai must have been much older to be treating her as if she was a child, you know, his child, you know, raising her and all of that. But he must have raised her in a way that was, you know, for her to be humble and loving and to do what's right in the eyes of the Lord and not be evil. Because even though she could have been killed or cast out or anything, like lots of things could have happened, the king, whatever he wanted to do could happen, she still took the chance of going to the king and presenting herself in a way that was against the rules. She went to him even though he had not asked for her, and it worked out. And the only reason it worked out is because God was in every single little bit of this. It was God's plan to save the Jewish people, and that is what God does if you're humble and kind. And you, now I'm not saying everything in your life is going to be perfect. There was a lot of pain and grief in this story. I'm pretty sure that Esther and Mordecai had a lot of troubling thoughts. Their lives were not perfect. I'm positive of that. They lost loved ones throughout their lives. They had hard times, but because they kept following the Lord and doing what He wanted, they were elevated in a place where they needed to be, or where God needed them to be. And it might not be that we see all of these wonderful things happening to us here on earth, but if we are not like Haman, if we're not like, if he had been looking at the good in his life, he wouldn't have been such a miserable person. He needed to look at the good, and we see what happened with him. He was so miserable that he just brought misery with him to everyone. So he ended up losing his life. His 10 sons lost their lives. It's like he destroyed his whole family, his whole lineage, because of his evil desire to ruin a people. And we just can't be that. We can't be like him. We got to be like Esther and Mordecai, and loving and not scheming, and just be there doing the right thing. That's what we're supposed to do. Now, are we going to be perfect? No. Do we know if Haman and Mordecai were perfect? No. But, I mean, it doesn't say in the Bible, but we know they're human, so of course they couldn't have been perfect. But anyway, I just feel like that was a good story, learning about sometimes we got to step out in faith to do things, and things work out. It's hard to do that at times, but we have to do that. So that is all I have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope that you got something from it. I don't know who I'm going to be talking about next, but I will figure it out, and you will find out next week. So thank you again for hanging out with me. I do appreciate it. And if you don't mind, leave me a comment down below. Let me know how you're doing. If you have a prayer request, you can leave that down there as well. You don't have to tell me what the prayer's about. You can just say, hey, pray for me, and I will add you to my prayer list. Or if you ask me to pray for someone else, I will add them. And remember, don't take any wooden nickels, and be sweet.